First Amendment isn't just a cultural anomaly, isn't just a cultural preference or a cultural shibboleth, which is a cool word that I like to look for opportunities to use, but it's a reflection of honor due universally to humans as a result of their position as delegates of God. That is, that they carry the image of God. Free speech is a universal right. We convey it in the terms of rights, but it's actually a responsibility that's rooted in the image of God. And that's the idea that I want to try to get here without spending too much time on what the image of God is. I just want to encapsulate it for the sake of brevity, that the image of God is a delegation that we have, not necessarily physical characteristics about humans, but that we represent God to the world and that we intercede like priests for the world to God. And the image of God is what is going to be the basis for the argument that I have that free speech is a biblical concept. Okay, so what I'm not going to be able to do is point you to a verse that has the First Amendment in it. If if that's the measure, then I'm afraid Greg's gonna win this debate. But what I'm going to try to do is demonstrate. I'm going to try to demonstrate this idea here that what we're looking at is an Old Testament concept, and a proper approach to this is to take the specific commands in the Old Testament, and I'm going to try to take the entire counsel of the Old Testament and as well as the New Testament, and derive from that concepts about God, concepts about people, derive principles from that, and then when we plop that down into our culture, what does that look like? And I want to try to convey this as best I can in the next 13 minutes or so, in a way that is most universal to not just our culture, but to any. So a person who conveys the image of God, who carries the image of God, who is a delegate of God, exists in his present form right here. The man in the middle represent a human present time. In the past, it gets grayer going into the past, the blue and the green going into the future. Right. So what this represents is a person's life in their entire expression, how they choose to live their life, how they choose to enact the image of God and the responsibility based on the word, based on conscience, based on commands of God. What they do in the past can accumulate. It can accumulate property. We can see here that in the past, this person has did things, and maybe he bought a house, maybe he got this bag of cash, whatever he did in the past, that's how he decided to represent the image of God, how he carried the image of God. What he does presently, what kind of work he does with his hands, with his feet, whether it's work that he desires, it's a work that he finds purposeful, or even if it's work that he has to do in order because he needs to take care of his family or make sure he has food. What kind of associations he has. Person can set aside their rights of to their past, their present, and their future to join associations. Church might be an example of that. I join a church, and to some degree, and I think to church too, it's kind of to a small degree, I'm willing to give up certain things, how I live my life to accommodate a group. And I have a little guy there defending because the defense of themselves, self-defense or defense of that group is also a part of that ability to maintain your responsibility and rights carrying the image of God. What you do going into the future is also the work you do, what your plans are, goals you have. If you want to go to school to get an education, you might work in the past to accumulate a certain amount of money to be able to do a certain amount of certain things, so you have certain skill set moving on into the future. So this is how someone expresses the image of God in the past, in the present, and in their future. And there's restrictions on what other people can do in our human activity, what other people can do in relationship to each other, right? In the past, you can't steal what someone has accumulated. You don't covet what someone has accumulated. You can't use unequal weights and measures to cheat someone out of what they've accumulated. In the present, you can't kidnap people. Hold Exodus 21:16. You can't put them in forced servitude. You can't commit extortion. You can't oppress people. If something is oppressive, it's wrong because it's denying them the full expression of the image of God in their life. In the future, you can't take away someone's future by murdering them. Genesis 9:6 tells us that whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For God made man in his own image. You can't kill a person because they're made in the image of God. And that extends both to what they're doing in their present. You can't extort them for the same reason. You can't kidnap them and force them to work for you for the same reason. And you can't steal the things that they used to in their past life to accumulate property. So past, present, future, there's restrictions on our human interactions because of the image of God. And past, present, future can also be expressed in life, right? In the future, you can't take someone's life. Present, liberty, you can't take their liberty away from them. And property, you can't take the past, the way they've used their life in the past to either accumulate property, because you don't have any business getting between them and how they express themselves with the image of God. So free will, there's a couple concepts that I think we can derive out of this kind of expression of the image of God. So I want to talk about those real quick. So one is that I think we can see from the Bible that free will, at least temporarily, is valued above the absence of sin. If God wanted there not to be sin, he would have been very easy to right. We have the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He could have built a barrier around that. He chose to have the choice, the liberty of the choice, more than he wanted the absence of sin. And if God values that, then we don't have the right to value the absence of sin more than the free will of other people.